I almost killed myself. Here I was popping 2 cartridges in, putting it down and pointing the scary end at my face, and I was about to do it.
Who is that inner voice?
My thoughts and feelings create my emotions. I realize that I'm not the voice in my head. I'm the observer of the voice. The moment we notice friction, that's our sign to create our own intervention. And we are totally reframing our concept of failure. There is no failure. Oh yeah, this happened and it sucked. What did I learn from it?
You said, Nyla, you must love yourself first. And do you find it weird that I struggled with what that even means? And so many people out there probably don't really know, what does it mean to love yourself?
If parents give you the distinct impression that you're worthless, then there's a good chance you're going to believe that you're worthless.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Untempered. Today is super special because I'm in Bali. This is a whole new setup. And actually this episode was done before, but I couldn't finish it because I had Bali belly and I couldn't show you the most amazing conversation that I had with Martin O'Toole, who's sitting in front of me today. Martin O'Toole, you are a trauma-informed psychedelic integration, breathwork, and mental health coach.
Yeah.
You have been my mental health coach. You're also a best-selling author of How to Die Happy.
Yep.
And
yeah, it's good to talk to you, knowing that there's not a potential for you to vomit at any second.
But I basically flew to Bali to have a journey with you. I made a conscious decision recently in my life after my divorce that I am not going to continue this version of me, and I'm going to create a new version. And you have been able to guide me and still guiding me through this journey.
To create Nyla version 2.0.
I know a bit about Martin version 1.0, but the struggles that you've been with they're very unique, I would say. Like, you've really had a crazy life. I mean, can you tell me about the rock bottom moment that maybe some of these people who are listening, they don't know about?
I guess the archetypal rock bottom moment that I write about in the book actually is the moment I almost killed myself. And I guess most people would argue that is a rock bottom moment, the rock bottom moment. The irony being that I actually had many more after that. But it was back in 2015. Yeah, my mum had died. She was an alcoholic. Her death somehow forced me to face myself. There was some introspection there. Suddenly realized I was an alcoholic. And I had all sorts of issues going on at that time. From a relationship perspective, from a professional perspective. I was supremely depressed, and I got to the point where I was just questioning my whole existence. I was also under investigation for tax evasion, money laundering, and fraud at the time. So there was a lot of pressure going on. There's a whole other story around that. I was never charged, by the way. But at the time, there was a threat that I could have ended up doing 10 years in prison. So all of it just came crashing down at the same time, and the depression got to the point super low. I drank a bottle of gin, nailed a couple of grams of cocaine. I had shotguns. I was a licensed firearms owner, and I took the gun out originally to clean it, but then I cleaned it, I remade it, I loaded it. And anyone who uses firearms knows that we never point a firearm anywhere. We always point it down, even if you know it's not loaded. It's just instinct. Here I was popping 2 cartridges in, putting it down and pointing the scary end at my face. And I was about to do it. Would I have done it? I can't tell you, but either way, I was in a very dark room and suddenly I heard this creaking and some light came in, and my little beagle, Macy, just sat in the doorway, just looked at me. And I looked at her, and I don't know if she was saying, don't do it, or who's going to feed me, but either way, suddenly and I just cried. Thanked the dog for saving my life, and that was the beginning of a roller coaster ride into version 2.0.
So you had to essentially get to that point to create version 2.0. But tell me about the exact thoughts that were going on. Was it just giving up, or what was the compiled emotions that created you in that moment that told you to pick up the gun and put it in your mouth?
Depression, real depression, is crippling. And it's driven by the inner critic and the voices in our head. And anybody who's watching this or listening to this who knows true depression will know exactly what I'm talking about. You get to the point where you're spiraling around the bottom of the sink, in the plug, and you're on your way down. So the voice was saying, you are worthless, you have destroyed your own life, you've destroyed other people's lives, you cannot change this, you cannot fix this, you don't have the tools to change your life direction. It's never going to get any better, so the best way to sort this out is to blow your brains out.
What's interesting, but so that voice that made you not do it, and the voice that told you the clear truth of what you were doing to affect other people, where was that voice when you were being the manipulator, the narcissist, the liar?
Yeah, it wasn't present. I couldn't hear my truth at that time. I was so lost in the illusion of mind, genuinely believed my thoughts and feelings, genuinely believed the voice that told me to do this, be that, say this. When you get to that sort of stage where you're lost in mind to such an extent, you don't understand that you are not the mind. There are many people, even now, I work with people now who might have a comprehension intellectually, I am not my mind, but I'm working with them using various mindfulness techniques and other practices that I get involved with to help them see the illusion of their mind. But if you don't see it, you don't know it, you have no idea of the truth, and you believe what the voices are saying, what these protectors, in terms of IFS, this is something you and I do, internal family systems, the protectors are telling us, and the protectors are only telling us this stuff, ironically, to protect us, but really because they're protecting a wound or several wounds. They don't want us to face our inner truth because there's a danger that it's going to hurt.
Yes, and you introduced IFS to me. I had read the book a little bit, but now that we're actually working with the protectors and working with the parts, it's so deep and it's so helpful to understand and to be able to be self-aware. When you hear that thought, you're like, wait a minute, who's saying that? Who is that inner voice? And I think for the longest time, it's so easy to just think that you are your emotions, you are your feelings, you are your thoughts, because you think something. And we talked about this with like the impulse of knowing that this is the last time I thought this, I reacted this way, and then it becomes a routine. So I had this journey with you yesterday, and we talked about protectors and parts. And now more than ever, I'm trying to pay attention to the parts and the voices that are. When people hear voices, they're probably thinking, is she nuts? No, they need to actually understand that we all have voices, multiple different personalities, voices, characters, and protectors that are sitting there and telling us certain narratives that really are not true.
Yeah. Well, they might be true to an extent, but they are limited truths based on perspective. I said this to you yesterday, I think. Perspective is a healer. But perspective is also what keeps us trapped in our various mental prison cells. Your thoughts and feelings aren't your emotions, but your thoughts and feelings create your emotions. Yeah? So what do we do with that knowledge? My thoughts and feelings create my emotions. Well, then I probably need to embody the truth that I am not my thoughts. How do I do that? I realize that I'm not the voice in my head. I'm the observer of the voice. How do I do that? Breathe. How do I know when to breathe? Friction. Observe friction. What's friction? Well, we all know what it is. It's when the mind tells the brain to flood the body with stress hormones, cortisol, adrenaline, noradrenaline. Suddenly we've got an increased heart rate. We're shallow breathing. We're breathing faster. We're breathing in the chest.
And snowball effect, right? The breathing, the thinking, the sweating, the hands going numb.
Yep.
That's I go through that, and it's like, whoa, it goes more and more and more and more and more until in the end you just feel overwhelmed. And usually that's, sorry to cut you off, but I relate that so much. It happens to me, and I peak to a level where I'm like, I need a drink, or I need to escape, or I need to just figure out a way to distract myself.
Mm-hmm. Or numb myself.
Or
exactly
numb myself.
That. Yeah, and it's good that you can hear that, so you can relate to what I'm talking about. And I'm inviting the people checking this episode out to do the same thing, because we're all familiar with these signs. Butterflies, tension in the chest, tension. These are all signs of what I call friction. What causes friction? Attachment. Attachment to an idea, attachment to an outcome, attachment to an expectation, attachment to a thought form. She should behave like this. He should talk like that. He has no right to do this. These are all thoughts. Yeah? Thoughts and feelings create your emotion. So what do we do with that? Well, we're back to breath. The moment we notice friction, that's our sign to create our own intervention. People always say to me, I don't understand the difference between presence and awareness. Where does this all begin? And the reality is it can begin at different places for different people. But if, let's say, you are completely lost in this, the illusion that you are your mind, that you are the voice in your head, and you don't understand that you're the observer, then notice what your body is telling you. And breathe. And breathe.
The friction part. Tell me, if we were to tell people how they could see this, how does it show up? How does friction show up in that state of mind? Like, what is friction? I want you to kind of dive into that a little bit more.
Well, friction is, first and foremost, it's mental, right? All of it's mental. So your thoughts and feelings create your emotions. Remember that. Your thoughts and feelings create your emotions. So the mind has kicked it off. And that's the irony, the power, and the beauty of this. Because ultimately, we can change our mind, right? This is Mindfulness 101. So we're looking out for, like you said, sweaty fingers. We're looking out for shallow breathing. We're looking out for tension.
Judgment, maybe.
Yeah, judgment, but judgment actually creates the friction. So you might not be aware that you're judging. You are aware of the friction that comes with it. So you're searching, you're not even searching, you are observing whatever creates the friction. When you feel the friction, that's a felt sense. Something not right here. I'm nervous, I'm on edge, I'm angry. I'm in a sympathetic stress response. So in polyvagal theory terms, I'm in a sympathetic stress response, which is what people know as fight or flight. So the whole nervous system's switched up. The autonomic nervous system's doing it all on its own. And this can happen just from a look. That's the thing. And of course, depending on what that look is, my body's ready, right? So we look for the friction because we know that's a physical response. I'm having a physical response to my thoughts. How do I fix that? Another physical response. Yeah, breath, the intervention. I'm in a sympathetic fight or flight stress response. I just start to consciously breathe. And I love breathing. Just slow in breaths, slow out breaths, and I can share a couple of techniques. 4-2-6, for example. What's happening then is there's an intervention, there's a physical intervention. I'm slowing down, I'm regulating my nervous system. So I'm slowing down my heart rate, I'm slowing down my breathing, of course. I'm breathing using my diaphragm. You probably notice suddenly, you know this because we talked about this, I'm suddenly expanding my diaphragm. And slowly but surely, I remove myself from a sympathetic response, from fight or flight to parasympathetic, rest and digest, safe and secure. That's the place you want to be to make your decisions.
I was just going to talk about decisions because it's something we really need to be aware of as well before we actually react in a fight, speak to somebody in a relationship, go into conflict at any point. making a decision, even a minor decision.
Sending a text.
Sending a text.
Reading an email from a narcissistic bully who's decided that's the only way they're going to get at you, you know? So these are, sorry to cut across you, but these are beautiful examples. There is a stimulus, and you just mentioned stimulus. So a text message, an email, an Instagram post, you know, that I'm just using modern day technological ways to get in each other's heads, right? That's a stimulus. Everything that happens is stimulus and response. And space. For a lot of us, there is no space. Stimulus, response.
Always.
Right?
And they're always there.
Yeah.
All stimuluses are always there. What stimuli are always there.
And why? Because you've been conditioned. You've conditioned yourself to respond quickly. So what I'm saying is not your fault. Actually, we're born into a mental prison. You don't have a say in that. Up to the first 7 months of your life, actually, the infant doesn't experience separateness. Everything is one. When we get older, we're born into a realm of duality, of course. So just by the very nature of being here, we grow into separateness. But we're also surrounded by separateness. Separate energies, individuals, egos. Mum, ego, have some of my imprint. Dad, ego, have some of my imprint. Whether that's good or bad, whether it's abuse, whether it's neglect. So, and then we're into this phase of trauma here, as we're talking about trauma of commission. Have some of that. Omission, don't have any. You're not having anything from me. You're not having my presence. You're not having my intimacy. You're not having my vulnerability or love. It's still trauma, big T's, little T's.
So we're carrying all of those with us, and then we're living in a world where the stimuli are always there in every single way, shape, and form. Every screen around us, everything is telling us, feel this way, see this, hear this, feel this energy, take this, you know, embody this kind of, compare yourself to this person. So we're already carrying this luggage, and then we're being given it all day long. And people ask me why I live in a treehouse for 7 days, because it's true. I'm encouraging people to do the same thing. And even then I have access to my phone, right? And I'm finding things, and you know this, and I'm texting you, oh, I just saw this person did this and did this. And it's like, we can't seem to get rid of it. So the only way, if you're feeling overwhelmed, really is to start to slowly take it all back.
Yep.
First, the shallow things like phone screens, reading, seeing, comparing, ingesting what the world wants you to have, the system. Here you go. We need you to feel this. We need you to buy this. And then removing all of this, and then going inwards to actually remove whatever have been imprinted in you. Yes.
And in addition to that, remember that gift of space, spaciousness. So what I'm encouraging people to do, and what you and I are working on at the moment, is practices that create more space. So whatever the stimuli, the point is, yeah, we can reduce and remove stimuli, we can change our environment, we can block, we can prune, and we ought to, because that's healthy boundaries. But still, there are always going to be stimuli. So the question is, what do we do about the response? And we create spaciousness. And we use practices like breath work and meditation. Practices that people still don't largely understand. Many communities would refer to as woo-woo, or they don't understand the point, or I don't have time to meditate. It's a luxury.
I think it's all excuses, right?
Yes.
It's so scary to be sitting there with nobody, no distraction, no stimuli that you're addicted to, and then you're like, oh, I'm going to look inwards now?
Yeah, you're actually inviting me to start looking at my own bullshit?
Yeah.
Nah. I'm going to go back to Instagram and ironically be emotionally stimulated by somebody that I don't want to have a connection with. So yeah, spaciousness is super, super, super important, because what you want to be doing ultimately, this is going to trigger a few people, but I'm going to say it anyway. Stuff is just happening. Stimulus. It's not happening to you. I'm a trauma-informed counselor, so I work with people who have experienced the most heinous things you can possibly imagine that could happen to a human being or to a child. So I do not say this lightly. These things do not happen to you. They happen, right? Whether that's physical, emotional, mental, and of course there is wrapped up in an abusive situation, there is a whole energetic exchange. But how we respond to the stimulus is what is going to tell is what's going to craft the future of our story. Now, nobody teaches us this stuff at school. In fact,
No.
I'm 49. When I went to school, my teachers bullied me.
Yeah.
So actually, I was abused by my own teachers. Our parents don't teach us this because they haven't got a clue. Again, I'm talking about my generation. We now have a whole new couple of generations of parents who are learning mindfulness. So this is great. So if nobody's teaching us this, then one of the things we have to realize, I suppose, I'll quote Carl Jung. Carl Jung said, life really does begin at 40. Everything up to then is doing research. And I quote that because I want people to realize that there is a period of everyone's life when we travel off into separateness, when we dance the dance, we drink the drink, we snort the powder, we do whatever we're going to do to consume the whole concept of separateness. We're going to explore the myriad facets of what it means to be disconnected from ourselves and others. The invitation at a certain period of time, Jung picked 40. People talk about midlife crises. Hopefully I'm putting a new spin on that right now in this conversation. There's an invitation to return. Okay, you've got some intel. You've done some suffering. You're getting a little bit older. You're getting a little bit wiser, hopefully. You're getting a little bit sick of your own bullshit. You feel stuck. All right, what are we going to do? So we start doing the work.
When you're in a self-deprecating loop, which I've been in, where it's like everything is my fault and everything is kind of like, I totally adopted the victim card for a long time. I think I still have that a little bit, and I now I'm aware to see it. I'm not like, I'm so healed now, but everything is work. But I can feel myself going back into the victim. But then it's what you reframed it for me as well. It's like what I've always resented and what's always happened to me and everything. It's like, actually, these were all the lessons that got me to actually want to create version 2.0. I don't think I would have wanted to create this version of me. Wouldn't have been here, wouldn't have been actually doing sessions with you. So in a way, there is some kind of liberation in having gratitude towards the trauma.
There is.
People are not going to want to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. But people don't want to hear a lot of this stuff, That's not going to stop us talking about it, though, because if they don't hear it, they don't learn about it, and they don't adopt it, then they're never going to change. So, and that's okay as well, by the way. People don't want to change. Don't change. Keep doing you. You do you. I'll do me. Ramdas, one of my teachers, said, all I can do to help you is work on myself. All you can do to help me is work on yourself. We're all too busy looking outside. I'm going to hit you up with another quote. Rumi said, maybe you're searching among the branches for what is only found in the roots. We're too busy looking at the external. Why? Well, we've already touched on it, because we don't want to look inside. So it suits us to judge other people. It suits us to rely on other people. It suits us to attach ourselves to other people, to attach our happiness, our sadness to what other people think, say, and do. So now we've come full circle. Stimulus and response. It doesn't happen to you, it actually happens for you. What we do with that story is what defines our future. The beauty of this, by the way, is, okay, you realize that? Then just stop for a minute, breathe, dispense with that future, because it doesn't exist, get back to the present and rewrite using breath.
Yes. And so I want to talk a little bit more too about the journey that we did. I gotta say, the meditating and the breath work stuff, I've always put to the side because I really I knew why I was making excuses, to be honest. I really don't want to be with myself, honestly. It felt like I abandoned myself a while ago, and then I'm kind of like living this loop and narrative, and it's like, if I'm productive, then kind of get a little bit of validation, but the real me is not really there. So when I was doing breath work, the first thing I felt was the sadness of not what happened to me, but how much I have abandoned myself based on the story that happened. So this happened to me. I'm a victim now. I'm going to abandon and disconnect and just move this body around the way I think everybody else wants to. For example, when I had my daughter, I just want to share this story. Like I was convinced that I know nothing about motherhood. I would say that. Again, we need to also talk about the power of words, because you talk about this in your book and you always tell me, why are you saying that? I would just say I'm not maternal. I don't know what to do. I would ask my mother-in-law, lovely lady. She tried to do her best as well with the tools that she had, but I just kept asking her, what do I do? Feeding, should I do this? I was so already convinced that I'm incapable of doing that. So I was attached to the lie that I told myself. I don't know if it's a lie, but like the story that I told myself that I can't do this. And it was like, I can't do this.
Yep.
That had so much power over me for so long until I realized, wait a minute, I can do this.
Yeah.
But the times that 7 months into having a baby, all I did was what everybody else thought I should probably do because I was asking them.
And what you told yourself.
And what I told myself. So it was something I want to talk about attachment. That's why I brought this up, is like your attachment to the story that you tell is probably the basis of where you can start. Correct me if I'm wrong. This is speaking from my experience. The basis of where you could start your healing journey. It's like I was attached to the victimhood, attached to the story that I am incapable, cannot trust myself. I am not maternal. I am, I wrote down in my journal after our time together that I used to always say out loud, oh God, I'm just, failed relationship after failed relationship. I must be just so bad in the dating scene. I don't even want a man anymore because I'm just going to mess it up. All these things had so much power over my life and were actually enabling the loop to recreate.
Yes, that's the beauty. That's the exquisite beauty of mind.
Yet we can use it in our advantage.
Yes, exactly that. When we get into this territory, we have to observe the machinations of mind and how mind essentially can get us and keep us in all of our trouble. And then, of course, there's a temptation then to say, well, then ego is the enemy. I don't subscribe to that. I like to use the analogy, which I use in the book, that ego is monkey. So the Buddhists talk about the monkey mind, the chattering monkey mind. And if people can grasp the idea that, and so we're back to square one again, of course, you are not the voice in your head. You're the observer of the voice. What does that mean? Okay, next time you hear yourself criticizing yourself, ask yourself, who's listening? Yeah, hang on a minute. I just heard myself criticizing myself. Who heard that? The observer. An observer. I believe there are a couple of different levels of awareness in the witness energy. So once you accept I'm not the voice in my head, I'm the observer of the voice, that's where the work begins. Because then we can start to see that it's the ego is just doing what ego does. Why is ego? Why is ego? It's here to survive. Ego exists to keep you here in this plane of existence, alive and well. We have different facets of ego, and it depends, obviously, if you go down the Freudian school or you look at Jung, or you look, and I guess I would lean into my own experience, my professional and personal experience. Actually, it's really a combination of everybody's thinking in that regard. There is a primal instinctual part of our ego that will do anything to survive, and I've met that part in myself and in my clients doing certain types of work, like the work that you and I touched on this week. But there are other facets of ego. So then we're back into internal family systems. There's a wonderful way of explaining that we have multiple personalities within us. Now, when I say multiple personalities, people might think about multiple personality disorder, which is now known as dissociative identity disorder. And people see that as a negative, of course, because they see that victims of extreme trauma talk to themselves, have voices in their heads. So that's a very extreme case of it, but in reality, we all have voices in our heads. Every time that inner critic starts telling you you're a piece of shit, to use your words, got to be mindful of those words. That's a part of you. It's a protective part. And that part, people are going to say, well, why does that happen then? I don't understand. If that's a part of me, and you're saying ego's not the enemy, but then my ego's telling me I'm a piece of shit. How is ego still not my enemy? Well, this is the paradox, a beautiful paradox. And actually, Dick Schwartz, the creator of IFS, wrote a book called No Bad Parts, which you've read, what he's trying to explain there, and what the whole philosophy and this experiential therapy shows us, is that part is telling you you're a piece of shit because it doesn't want you to do something. It's actually trying to talk you out of doing something. And it's talking you out of doing something. Let's riff with this, because obviously there are myriad different flavors here, but it's talking you out of doing a thing, perhaps because that doing of that thing would mean you leaning into your vulnerability. If you lean into your vulnerability, there's a danger you might fail. If you fail, you're going to be hurt. That part is protecting a hurt. It's protecting a wound or an exile, as we say in IFS. So this protective part is actually trying to help you. It's got your back. So it's calling you a piece of shit, which sounds awful, but that's because it's doing what it needs to do for you to hear it, because you didn't hear its earlier attempts. Let's say that you were wounded age 3. Let's say you were neglected by your parents. Yeah? Let's say mum was hypercritical. She shut you down. She said things to put you in your place to keep you quiet. On the contrary, dad was unavailable, unpresent, didn't give you the intimacy that you were seeking. So you're an infant and you want mum and dad. I want your attention. I want to be seen. I want to be heard. I want to be loved. I want to be touched. I want to be held. I need these basic things. I need to feel, yeah? And I'm not getting it from these people. And she's the representation for womankind. He's a representation of mankind. So what's that telling me about the male and the masculine and feminine energies? So how am I going to cope? Well, I've got to cope because I've got to survive. That's that ego. That's the id, the primal part. I've got to survive. We must survive. So let's develop some survival strategies. In that case, the protectors are going to protect that wounded child. She gets exiled. She gets stuffed away inside you, in your psyche, and also in your body, because the body keeps the score. Meantime, these protectors start to develop new ideas. How do I get seen then? Okay, well maybe that's sexualization. So maybe I become more of a sexualized being. Maybe I go out of my way to help everybody. Maybe I put everybody in front of me.
Become a people pleaser and shut down all your actual needs.
Yeah. So what am I doing there? 2 things. 1, I'm getting validation. 2, I'm being seen and heard. 3, I'm actually very cunningly ensuring that I don't have to look inside. I'm protecting the wound.
And these protectors, they come in so many different other ways. And it's not just that. It could also be fear of, not just failure, fear of success. Yep. You can be afraid to succeed because you don't feel worthy enough, because maybe growing up, your parents were like, oh, successful people are they're horrible people, or people with money are this, and that. So then you contempt. And so if you grew up in a contemptuous home, then you start to actually fear success. You start to fear becoming part of certain, you don't actually end up chasing your goals, or you procrastinate, or you do something and then you just ditch it. You start a project and you can never finish it. All these things are actually fear of success, also, not just fear of failure.
And procrastination is another protective part. So these parts have got your back. People now will be wondering, I'm confused then, what am I supposed to do? Well,
meet your parts.
Meet your parts. Yeah. Hi, I'm Nyla.
Yeah.
Who are you?
Yeah.
By the way, I'm in my 30s. I'm a skydiver. I'm a podcaster. I'm a mum, right? I have not got my shit together, but I am getting my shit together. Who are you? Well, I'm grumpy inner critic. Right. Can you tell me when you sort of came about? Yeah, you were 3. Right. So you're 3. That's interesting. That's a direct, we don't go that direct. Essentially what we're trying to do, first thing we do is we say, hey parts, who's about? And if nobody wants to come out, then we say, where are the parts? Where am I feeling the parts? Let's see, I'm feeling real tension here. Why am I feeling tension? So there's a somatic connection with the whole process, because we're not listening to these, we're not connecting to these bodies, Earth rovers, super intelligent biosuits. We need to connect better with the bodies, which is why I keep talking about breath, because it's
Slow
a somatic practice. Slow down,
There's
connect
only
with your
one
body.
way. It's slowing down. You can't really be
Feel.
aware of the thought, which then created this feeling, which then you have to be aware that feeling came from this past experience that was connected to that thought. You can't do that if you're just on the go 150 miles an hour trying to do 100 things at once.
Right, and you used the word earlier on, reactivity. So we were talking about stimulus and response, reaction.
Yes.
This is neuroscience. So obviously, the more our mind witnesses a stimulus, it develops a response, right? But then the brain is designed to make our response more efficient. So it reduces this space. But then there are lots of complexities there, because the mind doesn't always know the difference between physical and emotional pain. It doesn't know the difference between me shouting at you in a friendly way and an angry man shouting at you.
It just does what's familiar.
I hear a man shouting. Woof. So there's a autonomic, very fast response. And in that way, wow, we've got to be super impressed. I mean, these things are incredible, but they can get us into a lot of trouble. So yeah, fuck yeah. Slow down.
It's so true. I'm actually teaching my daughter this because she likes to do everything really, really quickly and then gets frustrated and she throws the toy and she whatever. It's just a toddler behavior, but it's interesting because no one ever tells the toddler, hey, let's take a moment to see if we can slow down.
Right, and isn't that a wonderful example that actually you might hear the child screaming, shouting, reacting, and that might trigger your nervous system response. So actually then you come in and, shut up, as opposed to teaching the child how to regulate their nervous system. By the way, well, I know a lot of parents and I know it's hard.
Yeah.
So I'm not coming in here sitting here saying, hey, it's really easy being parents, but if we're not practicing mindfulness, if we can't regulate our own nervous systems, how on earth can we expect our children to?
But I really do think that this is why I want to homeschool Callie, because I think I want to teach her those things before we just put her in school. I mean, we're not really teaching them to slow down by sending them to school 8 to 4 at 4 years old.
Right.
And being like, hey, study 6 subjects, have one tiny break where you're supposed to deal with about 25 personalities who I don't know where they're from. In Dubai, it's a very diverse culture. I mean, literally just multiple kinds of, nationalities, different styles of parenting, everything. And it's like, here you go to school, you're 4. And I just think that if you put me now with 25 people in a classroom under artificial light or in a room
where you don't want to be,
I would freak out, honestly.
Not to mention the fact that you were hoofed out of bed, out of kilter with your circadian rhythm. We don't. I mean, the whole schooling system as it is, it's archaic. I mean, it's Victorian. It needs redesigning, right down to the times we send the kids to school. People wonder why teenagers are so allegedly lazy and they won't get out of bed. Their circadian rhythm is designed that way. So we need to reevaluate all of these things. But yeah, I mean, if I was a parent, when I become a parent, I don't think I'll be putting them in any of these schools. I will want to put them in a school that has mindfulness and emotional regulation, emotional intelligence on the syllabus.
Why do you think so many people have the fear of failure, and where does that really come from?
That's a big question. Our fear of failure comes from being told or having an imprint that failure is bad. I don't believe in the concept of failure. There is no such thing as failure. There is only an opportunity to learn. We're coming back in these beautiful circles, these concentric circles around the whole conversation. Something you said that I'd written eloquently in my book that I don't remember writing is probably in part inspired by an idiom that's been largely attributed to the Buddha, although scholars argue it's not the case. Nevertheless, it sounds very Buddhist, and that is, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. Pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. So we're back to stimulus and response, yeah? The pain happened, the event occurred. This is why I say it didn't happen to you, it happened for you. There is an opportunity, even in the most heinous traumatic experience we can possibly imagine, right down to someone just being mean, for us to onboard and embody that energy that's being projected at us, or to see that person as an unwitting guru, to see the event as a teacher. There is a lesson in all of it. If we can open our minds and our hearts to that concept, then we are totally reframing our concept of failure. There is no failure. Oh yeah, this happened and it sucked. What did I learn from it? What did that person have to teach me? What did that event have to teach me? Don't get me wrong, okay, your parents die in an earthquake. Yeah, I get it. What can we learn from that? Well, I suppose we can learn about suffering and our relationship between life and death. What is my relationship with presence? How destroyed am I that my mum and dad just got crushed in an earthquake? Why am I destroyed? Oh, I know, because I regret a few things about our relationship. I didn't speak to them for 4 weeks. Last time I spoke to my dad, I told him he was a piece of shit. So there are always, even in events that appear to be alleged acts of God, there's always a lesson.
Let's talk about manifestation. We talked about it yesterday. I wonder if you can't really powerfully manifest unless you actually do meet your parts and heal first.
100%.
Because I see a lot of people actually doing courses on manifestation, and some of it, it's like all these Instagram, influencers are saying, manifest, think this, but all of it has a basic foundation that they've not mentioned, which is healing from a trauma and loving yourself, which you told me about yesterday.
Yeah, it's a phenomenon that we're experiencing now, and obviously being amplified due to technology. I mean, we're coming out to the world having this conversation, which I hope is randomly helpful to somebody. But we're able to discuss our perspectives, our truths, and they are only our truths. These are only my truths, obviously, and I fully appreciate the truth is relative, but we're able to do that and broadcast it to the world. These technologies, combined with a collective sadness, stuckness, profound level of people feeling like they just don't know what to do, like life is just shit. What am I supposed to do with that? People are searching for answers, and as a result of that, there is a phenomenon where a lot of people are going online and creating a course and creating a funnel sales machine, and they're saying, do this and you'll be a millionaire. That's a phenomenon. I'm not going to judge it. I've got no business with that. I've got no business with those people. But
you told me a really, really amazing story about manifestation.
Yes.
And you manifested, can I say the love of your
Please.
life? You manifested the love of your life, who's your partner. And that story was so beautiful, but it started with something so important. And I had never actually heard that. And now that's why that brought on the thought. I'm like, why don't people mention this when they're mentioning manifestation? Which is, you said, Nyla, you must love yourself first. And
yeah.
Do you find it weird that I struggled with what that even means, and so many people out there probably don't really know what does it mean to love yourself, like truly?
No, I don't find it weird, because there was a time when I didn't love myself. Most of the clients I do work with are struggling in some way to love themselves. It's a natural phenomenon, and I think
Yeah, why do you think so many people don't know how to love themselves?
Well, it's a combination of things, isn't it? It's conditioning. If your parents give you the distinct impression that you're worthless, then there's a good chance you're going to believe that you're worthless. That goes on to turn into behavior that is tantamount to self-harm, sex addiction, drug addiction, alcoholism, gambling. That's all self-harm.
Which isn't self-love, obviously.
It's the opposite. It's driving you away from self-love. Largely, we're not responsible for the things that happen. I'll go with the language for a moment. To you as a kid. Yeah, you're not. There's no way that you could pick and choose being in this house, that house, in that bedroom, in that place. No way you could even fight that person off if they were sexually abusing you or shouting at you or fighting or hitting you. There's no way you could do much if they were in every room of the house crashing and banging, apart from run and hide. Yeah, self-isolate. And even still, you would have heard it. And even still, you would be listening to it as a child. I remember this because I used to do this because I wanted to know why mummy and daddy are fighting. And I wanted to know what are they saying to each other. I wanted to know, are they going to get a divorce? What's going to happen to us? Fear. So there's no way we can help any of that. But we can help what we do now. That's the fundamental point. So this idea of assuming the victim's role, it's got to be addressed.
There's so much value in this podcast episode. I love it.
It's very kind of you to say. I hope other people think that. The thing about the parts work on that level, I've had so many clients get in touch with a very young wound. I had a woman who met her 3-month-old version.
It goes back that much.
Yeah. I mean, you really can push it back. And I had a young man who met his 6-year-old self who had been sexually abused multiple times. And he did not have a conscious awareness of it. So suddenly he obviously had a huge emotional response to this as he could see this little boy curled up in the corner, and then as he cried harder because he realized there was another protective part of him that had told him this didn't happen. Literally, this didn't happen.
Suppressed it completely.
We're putting that one right down here. So suddenly he had this realization that he'd been gaslighting himself. He told himself, I feel like I might have been sexually assaulted. So then he had to then see this part, see that this was his truth. I mean, this was a beautiful experience for him. But I invited him to just center for a moment, turn back to the child and ask the child, what does he want? What does he need from you right now? Lo and behold, this little boy said, I need a cuddle. So I asked him, of course, especially with sexual assault, we have to be very careful with any discussions around somatics, touch. So is he okay for you to touch him? Yeah, he's fine. And this guy's a father of 2. Give him a hug. And he gave himself a hug and he started to hug himself. And this was the first time he'd ever connected with this 6-year-old, sorry. The first time. First time he'd ever heard the 6-year-old. So suddenly the 6-year-old part is saying, thank you. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for hearing me. And that's the beginning of a love affair. So my prescription, for want of a better word, if we have an experience like that, of course, is to check in with me on a regular basis because this is deep work, but also is to check in with the parts. There's a whole process to this. Obviously we're paraphrasing it, but part of it then was to help this part unburden, and to promise this child that he's going to come and see him every day, and to promise this child that he's going to access this relationship, this energy between him and the child. This guy grew up early as a result of all of this. Why did he come to me?
What was how is that showing up in his life?
Depression. Extreme, inexplicable depression.
And would it be fair to say depression, perfectionism, procrastination, any kind of trait that's showing up in your life and keeping you stuck or making you, not live your life at potential? It's friction. It's a message from your subconscious.
100%.
And we're just ignoring it.
1000%.
I had anger. I really had, and I didn't know why. It would just come up, or there would be a good reason to be angry, but the reaction didn't grant. That reaction wasn't what really should have happened. It was always an overreaction. I didn't know where it was coming from, but I read that that's not actually a main emotion. It actually comes from sadness.
I like to say anger's sad's bodyguard.
Sad's bodyguard. Yeah, that makes sense, though.
I don't know if I made that up or
I think you just made that up on the spot.
Hoovered it up from somebody else. But either way, I think it's a beautiful, it really helps us reframe anger. Anger's sad's bodyguard. There's a beautiful model created by a chap called Marshall Rosenberg, and it's called NVC, Nonviolent Communication. We've been touching on it, but I've not introduced it to you properly, but it's a wonderful framework to invite us to And of course, we have to be aware, so we have to be present, so we have to have a somatic practice like breath first and foremost, to be able to observe a situation. What did I use the word? Friction. So you have to be able to observe the friction, search for the feeling. When you say, I feel tired because she's not listening to me, that's not a feeling. Search for the feeling. So we keep doing that until we get a feeling. And then we search for the need that's driving the feeling. Yeah. So we've gone from, in the exchange, we've gone from ego versus ego to trying to find empathy. The moment we find empathy, it's heart to heart, right? So then we're communicating adult to adult. And in Burns' transactional analysis model, this is what we talk about. Is we're talking about trying to achieve an adult to adult exchange, transaction he calls them, rather than a parent to child or a parent to parent or whatever. So we're trying to connect conscious energy to conscious energy. And when we do that, something completely different happens. Then we can make a request. So there's a whole model, there's a book called MVC, but observation, feelings, needs, request. And what we're doing is we're using observation, not evaluation, discernment, not judgment. So instead of me saying, you do this, and it pisses me off, right? And that is me expressing that something's happening and it's making me angry. But how did it feel? Doesn't feel the same, does it? You do this and it pisses me off. 99% of the time you're going to receive that.
Defensive.
Right.
Yeah.
So what's happening? Douche, douche, douche.
All the way.
Right?
Yeah.
I'll see you and I'll raise you.
Yeah.
Right? My monkey's louder than yours. Fight or flight.
I do that. Did that. Version 1.0.
That's all right. If you do it, you're a work in progress.
No, but actually, I feel like I get angry a lot less now.
Good.
You know what I mean? I think I would have been charged to always have that reaction in the day. I would have said a lot of things would have made me angry.
Yeah, I mean, I think through the work we've been doing lately, I see that you're still being reactive, but you're not kicking it over the line. And I think it was Eckhart Tolle that said something along these lines, but this really has always resonated with me. The moment you become aware that you were unaware, then you're aware. So it doesn't matter. You're present again. You are in the now. You're accessing the power of now. That's one of his most famous book. So we mustn't judge ourselves for, I think there's a temptation for us on the healing journey to say, oh, I've done loads of work, I'm healed, I'm fixed, and blah, 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 and all the other language that we throw into it. I've been doing this for years and I've still got tons of neuroses and I'm still triggered. And I told you a story about that the other day. The difference is that I can see the triggers. I can often stop the triggers. When I say stop them, I don't mean suppress. I mean redirect that energy. Or at the very worst, I can see what came out of my mouth is not something that I meant to say. And I can immediately say, I didn't mean to say that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
You observe it and you know.
I made a mistake. Sorry.
I don't like saying I don't like when people say I'm healed. I don't want to say that I'm healed because I feel like that means I'm just going to stop working.
Yes, and so this is a beautiful, so we're into the space of spiritual bypassing, I suppose, now, to an extent. The more you search for ego, the more cunning ego has to become, right? So,
like when people become healed, but now they're just becoming, better at manipulating because they know the verbiage.
Yeah, and manipulating themselves as well. I mean, ultimately, if we tell everyone and ourselves that we're healed, then there's a good chance that we might feel healed. But if we are still displaying unhealthy traits, ego's still doing what ego does.
But we think we're healed. That's dangerous.
Yeah, it's very dangerous.
Yeah.
And the phenomenon is broadly known as spiritual bypassing. It was the phrase was coined by a psychologist called John Wellwood, and he was talking about how we seek out modalities and practices, spiritual modalities and practices, and lean right into them as a way to reject our shadow,
to not actually do the actual deep work.
Yeah, exactly. Because if I'm high And obviously, as a psychedelic integration coach, I get this a lot when I work with clients who are constantly having psychedelic experiences without any integration. So they're high all the time. I'm high. And if I'm high, the higher I am, the less connected I am to my roots, to my lower energies. It's not an aesthetic thing I'm talking about here. It's if we don't do the structural work and then we build a house of cards on top of it, then it can come down very quickly. Yeah. And it does often for people who spiritually bypass. You know what? I think psychedelic integration is actually more important than the psychedelic experience itself. Because the process of integration can really be applied to work with any non-ordinary conscious state, which is what I do. Breathwork is a non-ordinary conscious state. You could argue that IFS in a way was a non-ordinary conscious state, because we're putting ourselves, and of course psychedelic use is a non-ordinary conscious state, as is meditation. But then so is ecstatic dance, and it goes on. A conscious state, an ordinary conscious state, is consensus ordinary. Yeah. So what does the consensus believe is traditional consciousness? So whenever we put ourselves in a non-ordinary conscious state, we are opening the aperture. We're opening ourselves up to new energies, new perspectives. Remember what I said about perspective being a healer, and we're able to see ourselves in a different light. When we do psychedelics, and we're doing it a lot, there are phases here. There are profiles for people who have psychedelic experiences. Of course, some people will have very traumatic experiences. Well, when I say traumatic experiences, it's not always a bad thing, because people relive their trauma. In the expanded cartography of the psyche, we have 3 different territories. We have biographical stuff, that's your life stuff. We have transpersonal, so that's consciousness outside of the body. And we have perinatal, which is all around the trauma of birth. But one of those profiles is people who work with psychedelics frequently and don't do any integration. I'm coming around to you to answering your question. What we find is when we do psychedelic work or any non-ordinary conscious state work, but do not then follow an integration process, then we don't take on board the information that we're receiving. We don't use it. We ignore it. And the more we ignore it, actually in psychedelic terms especially, the experience then turns into a more of an ethereal, transpersonal experience. I'm seeing aliens, I'm seeing entities, I met God, I'm Jesus, I'm Buddha, which can lead to ego inflation. I'm considerably more enlightened than you. I'm superhuman, that sort of experience. And it's a bypassing. So to answer your question in a real short way, what did integration do for me? Integration showed me how to understand what was being presented to me. And why. To interpret it. And of course, that's very relative, So I use something called constructivism, it's the constructivist approach, as I was trained by my teacher in this field, to assume that your relative reality is what we're talking about here, not mine. Your relative reality. So whatever you experienced, we need to talk about. What does it mean to you? What does that cat dancing on a frog represent to you? So it was about, for me, it was about finding out that all this rich material could actually help me understand what my unconscious mind was trying to tell me, and then put that into a plan. Well, okay, actually I got this message, that message, and this message. I've now interpreted them. These were from my unconscious mind. Should I ignore them? Or should I actually put them into my life plan for the next 6 months? And that is next level, stellar stuff. That's like, well, it's life coaching from you to you.
Thank you. Thank you for existing. Thank you for being you.
Thank you for existing. Thank you for being.
Thank you for not killing yourself.
Oh yeah,
as a friend.
Let's have an extra thanks for that one.
Do
you know, I'm so glad I didn't kill myself. The adventure I've had since then, wow, I would have cut all of that out. So maybe if I'm going to leave anybody with anything, you can change at any moment, any breath you can change. So if you think it's dark, you think it's over, you think you're stuck, you think you're fucked, you're not. You can unfuck yourself.
Beautiful. I love that.
Can I swear on this?
Yes, of course. Okay. Yes. And Can I share the recording for your free breath work?
Yes, yeah, of
It
course.
is so good. It's such a good introduction. It's very mild. It's perfect, and it kind of shows you the feelings
But
and
it-
it shows you the relief that comes from it.
But they won't know the technique. So maybe
You say it and you say it in there.
okay.
Where it's like stomach, breathe into your
into your
belly.
stomach, into your chest, let go.
And we do that for 4 minutes. And then we hold for 90 seconds.
Expanding the
Yes.
rib cage. That's
Mhm.
really important.
Yeah.
All through the mouth.
And I always get tingling, and then I always get like this, the monkey fighting back. No, don't do this.
Can't do
Wait,
this.
should we check the phone? And should we do this? And sometimes I'll even get like little distracting things like, oh, I think it's too hot. Maybe I should just cut this off and turn the AC on. Like you have to be aware of those little ways that we try to distract
Monkey
ourselves.
doesn't like breath work.
No, monkey does not like breath work. And you have to just let go, surrender, and trust it. And I promise that in the end, you just really feel different. You feel better.
Do that every morning for 30 days.
Yeah.
Tell me how you feel.
Yeah. I'm going to put the link for everybody.
Spaciousness. I'm going to make some more content, make some videos and stuff so people can have all of that. I want people to breathe.
Yes. Breathe like you mean it. I love
Breathe
when
like you mean
say
it.
that.
Yeah, you remember my tagline.
Yeah, I do.
Nice.
Thank you so much, Martin.
Thank you,
I'm
darling.
so
Thanks,
grateful.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for working with me.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode, and please subscribe so that we can get more amazing guests like Martin on this podcast. Thank you for listening.